Welcome to the CloudPod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, Google, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
and Peter.
Episode 18, recorded on April 11th. It's a Google Next level recap. That good?
Yeah, I thought you were going to go right into it. That's fine.
Oh, I could have. I just thought
we normally do the round of applause because it's the end of the show, but I guess since it's the beginning of the show, I didn't.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that. Sorry, I wasn't prepared. Welcome, guys. It's been a busy, crazy week here in San Francisco with Google Next wrapping up today with two fantastic keynotes on Tuesday and Wednesday. A ton of vendors, 35,000 new friends on the show floor and in the sessions. It's been busy. So the first order of business, of course, is the draft from last week. And so we actually have an interesting challenge that's come up out of the draft, which is that we believe we are in a three-way tie. But there's a discrepancy.
You believe we're in a three-way tie?
Yes, Jonathan would like to go to our guest tonight, which is Ryan Lucas. Ryan, you want to say hello?
Hello.
Who we mentioned last week was sort of jokingly would be our tiebreaker if we were not in agreement, but that very quickly realized we would need him. So he is here to hear Jonathan's case and be judge, jury, and executioner on if Jonathan gets the winning point here or not. So Jonathan, I will let you present your case.
Well, I went back through the transcript of the keynote from day 2, Wednesday, and I heard the words, and I quote, "Eventually."
I see the attorney is well prepared. Yeah. So while he's finding his evidence here, we can. Basically, I nailed enterprise will be a big part of the show, being mentioned 4 times on stage by Thomas or his guests. I nailed that within the first 20 minutes of the first day keynote, and it was very clear throughout the whole session that enterprise was their main focus. Peter nailed hybrid service mesh with Istio, which was added into the announcement we'll talk about a little bit later around Athenos. And then Jonathan nailed collaboration tools with what looks like a potential Slack type chat service inside Gmail. So, it was a real nice win there by Jonathan on day 2 that we thought he was going to come out of this with a goose egg. So are you ready to present your case now, Jonathan?
No.
Well, the judge might throw this case out on lack of technical evidence.
Well, we said that the rules were going to be that had to be mentioned in a keynote, and what I said was additional runtime support for functions. And while it wasn't called out as in, hey, we now support PHP, we now support Node, we now support Python, it was mentioned in a context of Cloud Run.
Combines the speed and ease of use of serverless computing of functions with the flexibility and portability of containers. So you can use any language and any runtime in cloud functions.
I rest my case.
All right, we'll give Ryan, we'll let you deliberate and make your judgment call on
What's
this.
said on stage? I do think that there's a case for all of these things.
I mean, on one side of it, I'm sort of like, you can give it to him because then at least we have a winner out of this draft versus the three-way tie. But on the other side, on the principle of it, I'm totally opposed.
Yeah. Well, I think, for me, it's a lot about the predictions and how you guys did. I'm enterprise mentioned 4 times. I think that was a gimme going into here. Google is clearly trying to make a play for the enterprise space to catch up to their competitors. And so, of course, they're going to lead on an enterprise heavy message there. And the collaboration tools is the other one where I'm like, is it? They're introducing chat into their mail thing? Yeah.
The very first words that came out of my mouth when we did the draft was a new messaging system. And then Justin's like, a messaging system? At the cloud conference?
I was also clarifying, are you talking about like a Kafka PubSub type product, which they already had, or are you talking about a chat service? But yes, I was questioning that as well. But then one thing I had completely forgotten about with Google is that they have a whole product called G Suite that's going to be part of this conference. And so while I was making fun of you horrifically last week, it was a bad taste on my part because I was completely forgetting about G Suite because it's just not something I really think about with Amazon, unfortunately.
I'll do you a deal. If you give me new languages for functions, I will give up messaging as a point because it's just an extension to Hangouts, which is an existing product. So I don't know that really counts.
So that was really my point on it. Like, I was like, is this really a new messaging service? Not really. It's sort of an integration with their Hangouts and into their mail service, which are both things that already exist and still questionable in what they're trying to do with that platform.
Yeah, that is not new.
Yeah, I can see the point on Hangouts. What was it called? Hangouts Meet or something?
It's Hangouts chat in Gmail is what they're doing.
All right, you get functions. You don't get collaboration tools.
All right, well, I'm happy.
All
with
right,
that.
so then we're still at a 3-way tie.
No,
So
we're not.
perfect.
Honorable mention. Tiebreak goes to
No,
Peter.
we did. We were very clear that honorable mentions get no points. They're just an honorable mention. So it is a 3-way tie, unfortunately.
all
But you
right.
nailed that better Microsoft support pretty well in the keynote as well.
The good news, Peter, is that you still win because the amount of which you nailed your prediction on the hybrid service mesh sets it, head and shoulders above the best. Not only did they announce exactly that, they made exactly the play that you were talking about in your prediction. So you still win.
But so what I found out, because I was like, oh, this Anthos thing sounds really cool. And then I was talking to a Google customer. He's like, oh yeah, they announced that last year as a beta at the keynote, and now this is just them rebranding it from GSCP to Google Anthos, and they're GAing it. So technically, that would disqualify that call from the keynote, from the draft, anyways, because it's a pre-known product.
But I disagree that they already announced it because what they announced previously was a service mesh-like project, not something that was specifically binding together your on-prem and cloud workloads.
So agree, and so that's why I'm totally not arguing about the Istio thing, because that was not mentioned last year. But the concept of like a major GKE announcement that would potentially be on premise, which was kind of what he had as his first prediction, technically wasn't a valid draft pick by the rules. But we'll let it go because we're all new to this.
Basically, for the next time, you all have to cheat more and make it a lot harder for me.
Well, I think next time
go.
we'll have a much better. I have a much better idea of what they're going to be doing and kind of moving forward for next year. So I think, if we were doing the same draft for AWS, I think it would be a much different conversation. Or even Azure, because they're both more well known to all of us than Google, which I think is still pretty new to everyone, maybe but Peter. So
I think it's still new to Google, to be fair.
That's true. Well, let's move on from the draft. But congratulations to all three of us for at least getting one thing right.
Yeah.
So our crystal balls were good, and then I do give you props, Peter, on that honorable mention. That was a really nice call. So
I think I actually said a Cloud SQL version of MS SQL Server.
You may have done.
But if you put that in your draft picks, you would have had 2 points and you would have won this whole thing.
I
But you
know.
put it as honorable mention. So
I know. My bad.
I put a lot of thought into why the other predictions I made didn't come true.
I do
And
too.
The blockchain thing makes no sense because I googled Ethereum Kubernetes, and like the first 50 things in the list is this is how you run Ethereum in Kubernetes. Like you can literally terraform the thing in 10 minutes and deploy it on GCP anyway. So why would they run that as a service? Who cares?
Yeah, that's exactly like what is Google's incentive to running this service? Like who are their customers going to be? How do they monetize it? Like what's the return on investment for them there? And I think that's where it gets a little fuzzy. Yes, it's something they could do, but is it actually valuable for them to do? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I realized out of this conference is that they are so far behind on primitives that to be expecting any higher level services at this point is probably unfair. And so what blockchain as a service might be something they would do eventually just to make it easier for people than running a Kubernetes cluster. There's so much other stuff for them to do first that it doesn't make sense for them to do something that's so niche. That was kind of my big takeaway from the whole conference is that, being third into this market is advantageous for a lot of reasons, but it also means you're also the farthest behind of everybody else. And so you shouldn't expect the same level of feature delivery, the same level of quality in what they're delivering right now as Amazon or an Azure service would be.
I was super surprised that there was no ARM support. I mean, Windows runs on ARM. Chrome OS runs on ARM. Every Android phone pretty much runs on ARM. And in fact, Google were working with Qualcomm a couple of years ago on the Qualcomm ARM server cores. Seemed like a safe bet, but
I think it comes back to them still being new. If you think about, how much effort it takes to spin up new regions, new data centers, and then how to manage all that hardware, and then to have a separate RMA process, a separate classification, separate SKUs for different hardware and on the actual infrastructure level, it actually introduces a lot of complexity to support a different type of machine. And so it makes a lot of sense if you're just trying to expand and gain market shares to simplify your efforts and only support one type.
when they first announced this, like back in 2006, that they were working with Qualcomm, or it was leaked actually, it wasn't announced officially. Like right after that came the Intel Skylake CPUs. And I'm kind of wondering if they just used that announcement as leverage for pricing for Intel, because Google Cloud were the first people to have the Skylake CPUs. And it makes sense, because those things, they have like amazing floating point performance, which is what Google need for machine learning. I'm going to say they've got to have some ARM stuff, but maybe they just don't expose it publicly.
I think it's maybe something that's still on the roadmap. It goes back to the primitives, and I just don't think it's their priority right now. Their priority is to catch up as fast as possible. And again, ARM is still pretty niche. And so is it something that enterprise customers are going to run to if they announce it today? And I don't think the answer to that question is yes. That's the filter I didn't have when I was going through my predictions, was that perspective that I think is really helpful to have.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the CloudPod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
Let's talk about just overall general conference thoughts, impressions. This was Thomas Kurian's first, real exposure to the world beyond, customer meetings he's been having over the last 10 weeks since he joined Google. I thought he did a fine job on stage. He's a little bit more laid back in his presentation style than I was expecting. I thought he'd be a little bit more rambunctious, and it was really a shame because they put Sundar up very first thing in the keynote, and he's a fantastic speaker. He's very high energy. You could tell he was excited. And then you kind of went to Thomas, and it was like this very big juxtaposition of like this one person is really dynamic and really energetic on stage to a very calm, very thought-driven conversationalist. So that was kind of my first initial take. But what about you guys?
No, I heard that he didn't use any notes for his entire keynote. He did not use any teleprompter, no notes, no nothing. He stood there and did the entire thing from memory. So, I mean, that's impressive. To be as calm and well thought out and time the thing the way he did. His delivery was really good. I mean, is it necessary to do it without notes? No. But it shows that he knows what he's talking about.
I actually felt completely opposite. From where I was sitting, at least the first day, I could actually see the teleprompter. So it's not like he's doing it completely from memory. Yes, he's not reading from a script like a lot of the other presenters were, but it's more of an improv type of style, which some people are, more comfortable with. But I think it actually led to a very stilted, awkwardly paced format, especially as he was doing the kind of like conversational dialogue with like a customer that he brought up on stage. It had an awkward pacing. It didn't feel comfortable, and it was sort of felt forced to me. I didn't like it.
I wasn't there.
Did you watch the video, though, Peter?
Absolutely not. I read the notes.
All right, fair enough.
Why would I watch it?
One of the things that I felt was really awkward in the keynotes was they paraded out a lot of customers and a lot of partners. And instead of letting them just kind of come out and talk, they did this very interview-style approach to it. In the first day, they did Chase Bank, and they did a couple of healthcare companies. I think Philips was the first day, and it was very clearly highly scripted, because no PR company or PR team of your company is going to let you just go out onto stage and let Thomas Kurian ask you random questions on stage and not have a pretty good idea what your answer is going to be. It was effective in getting that message out that enterprises are here and they're using Google. It was also not the best foot forward of how to present those customers to the audience, I think.
The Australian New Zealand Bank was kind of interesting, because at reInvent, I met a couple of guys who were talking about how they were moving to AWS. And I guess operationally they're moving to AWS, but for analytics, they're still using Google Cloud. So it's an interesting customer to stand up there. I kind of wonder if they were short on customers.
Well, I think in general, as someone who has a requirement to get customers to agree to talk on our behalf or to talk about it, get agreement to talk about our customers, it's definitely not easy. Nobody wants to be that person. So usually, it was preemptive when they were getting them as customers that they wanted them to be use cases. And so those are the ones they're going to have up there.
The McKesson deal is really cool. I mean, they're the largest company nobody's ever heard of, unless you work in healthcare. Their headquarters is in San Francisco, I think, but they've got like a $208 billion revenue. They're 5th or 6th in the Fortune 500. And, everybody else on the top 10 is like Walmart, CVS, ExxonMobil, Apple. Nobody's heard of McKesson.
The thing that was interesting to me, so there was announcements before, we'll get to those in a little bit here, but there was announcements before around, the new healthcare APIs, and then McKesson kind of going all in, not really, they didn't announce all in, but, strategically partnering themselves with Google to be their cloud provider. And so then, they had the CTO on stage day 2, and it was really interesting to me because it's very clear Google is having a very large influence on their culture of their company and how they're doing business. And it's interesting to me because while if you're a CTO that really understands and knows what you need, and you need that transformation and Google's willing to come bring that to you, that's really great. But a lot of CTOs would tell Google to get out of the door. If Google came in and said, well, you're not doing things in the Googly way, and so therefore we don't want you to be, our cloud provider or using our cloud if you're not doing it the Google way. Where the case with McKesson, I think he's probably a very high level CTO level. He's probably not as close to the technology as other people are, and so he potentially identified that challenge, and Google was interesting to him because if they could be more googly, that's a good win. But how well does that resonate to other CTOs who have a different opinion about how they run their shop? I don't know how well that interview went across to the layman's person. I know for me, I found it to be a very aggressive, do it the Google way presentation, which was kind of the opposite of what they've been talking about for the entire keynote, which was, we're going to meet you where you're at. We're going to make the technology that you need. We're going to get you the sales and support that you need to do your business. And then you have this McKesson CTO up there, and it's, Google's making us change everything. And that's kind of the opposite of what they were trying to send, I felt.
In a dictative kind of way that they're making them change things, or do you think it's the Google culture, the idea of the Google culture that's making them change?
Well, he wasn't very specific, but it was an interesting message that, especially with Google's reputation of sort of being kind of bully about how companies do certain processes. And if you're trying to, make up some ground from third place in the hyperscaler world, it's sort of interesting to march into someone's office and be like, well, you have to do it this way to adopt our product. And it wasn't specific, but it was sort of like, yeah, we had a lot of changes that we had to make in order to partner with Google. Like, that's not really what you want to do, is it?
There are a couple other interesting things from the keynotes to mention. Thomas Kurian talked about privacy. He had a whole slide of, we're not going to spy on your data, or your machine learning models are yours. The data is always yours. We don't want access to your data. Really trying to address some of those privacy concerns. At the moment in the keynote, when it went over really well with the audience, there was a lot of applause and all that. But I wanted to go kind of the next level. Is like, and here's how we're assuring what I just told you is actually going to happen. And it's not just me, Thomas Kurian, telling you privacy is important. It's actually something Google believes in. And we're doing that through third-party auditing with, transparency reporting, something there to really put some teeth into that would have made that a much more compelling thing for me, after I left the keynote. In the keynote, it sounded like this is really great. But then, you start thinking about it, you're like, well, you didn't tell me how you're going to guarantee that you're doing those things. And I'm taking your word for it. And I don't know how much I trust Google yet. And it's sort of this weird juxtaposition we are in this space where, how much do you trust Google? How much do you trust Amazon? How much do you trust Microsoft? And that's kind of an interesting question. And I like the effort. I like that they put it on main stage. I don't think Amazon's ever put that on main stage, that privacy is important to them in that way. I mean, it's in their security controls and their security white papers, but it's not something they've ever presented on stage like that in a big forum. So I applaud them for that effort. I just wish that there was a little bit more teeth to it.
I thought they announced a transparency log, actually.
Google or someone else?
Oh, maybe it was someone else. I thought it was Google.
I mean, it might be. But again, if you had that, why didn't you mention that on stage too?
Right,
that wasn't on his slide.
Yeah.
I think they had to mention privacy because they're in the middle of this GDPR mess with the EU and they're being fined $58 million. And if they got on stage and they didn't make privacy there, at least one of the top priorities, I don't think it would reflect well because they're seen as somebody who, as a company who have so much money, they don't need to follow the law. And I don't think it would work out well for them if they continued to ignore the new privacy rules in the EU. As judges, they come up with arbitrary fines. Today it's 58 million. If they think you're not making the effort you're supposed to, it'll be 158 million, and then it'll be 500. So
it's a good take on it that I hadn't thought about at the time. But yeah, again, it's good to see someone talking about it. It was sort of this weird juxtaposition, though. In the they had a swag store on the conference floor. It's like a bookseller, and they had front and center on one of the tables the Zucked book. And I was like, well, that's a little pot calling the kettle black on this one, isn't it? Putting Zucked front and center as a book that you want to buy at the Google conference when, right after Facebook, the number 2 is probably Google with data privacy. So overall, I think the keynotes were well received. I think, the production values of the entire event were very high. It's a very nice event. The amount of effort Google put into making that a high quality reInvent level venue and, process and registration system and mobile applications, that was all really high quality. The lunch let them down in major ways. It was pretty awful both days, as Ryan and I were talking about it. But overall, I think the conference was a big success for Google in a lot of ways. But it does leave me with still some questions.
Is this where I'm supposed to say something?
Sure.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Like those awkward gaps, I just assume it's like I missed.
They all get cut out. Those all get cut out. It's fine. Okay, we all sound great at the end.
Do you listen to the show?
I tend to agree. I was really impressed with like the mobile app, and a lot of the presentation that we saw as far as like the signage and all those stuff, which is I admire myself on the details. I'm an old technical theater geek, and so I sit there and I stare at all the lighting rigs, and I find it all very impressive. The food. Some of that is they're subject to the venue. It's not always a choice, but I think the real difference between say something like reInvent and this was in the content of the keynotes. I felt that it was light. I feel that because they're working on primitives, they don't have enough major announcements, and so they're trying to spin a narrative of we're ready for your business, we're ready for your big business, your enterprise business, but then they sort of don't have anything else to fill out the 3 days, and it was a little bit hard to stomach through the second keynote because you're like, this again, okay. They're rehashing the same announcement they made the day before and then just parading customers on stage that are all basically saying the same things in very broad strokes. We get it. We know how big businesses adopt Google. Good job.
Typically, when you go to an Amazon keynote of any kind, a summit or the reInvent, they're very metrics driven, right? And so all the quotes are, Amazon saved us, 75% on our storage costs. It's, we moved our big data lake from, on-premise to AWS, and we improved our processing time by, 13% from, 8-second queries to 2-second queries, right? They're always very metrics driven. They're all very, very tangible technical things that they quote. And they're all on the posters, they're on the billboards, they're on the TVs. You see them at the events. And then even in the guests that they have on stage, they're very metrics driven. And that's a big part of how they want to do a keynote. The Google quotes were all very aspirational, like Google's going to help accelerate our transformation to a more democratic technology center. And you're like, what? What does that even mean? Like it sounds flashy and very marketing, but it doesn't actually have a lot of substance there. And that was one of the other kind of weird juxtapositions, comparing this to something like reInvent, where, it's very clearly a very marketing driven PR positive message that they're trying to drive versus here's the real metrics of how we've helped people change their business.
I wasn't excited about anything enough that sitting down at dinner time, I'd say, oh, hey, guess what they announced? They didn't announce anything which wowed me to the point where I wanted to talk to my family about it. It was very business orientated, very kind of processy and, like you say, very marketing, not tech oriented at all. I was hoping for a much more tech event with many more product announcements, and it was, I don't know, it didn't wow me.
We complain often about reInvent's breakout sessions are very basics, like, introduction to IAM, introduction to EC2, and you're like, I really want more meat. I want something more full featured. And Google actually has the opposite problem in their breakout sessions. All their breakout sessions are like machine learning intermediate level, and you have to know what machine learning is to even have any sense of what's in that content. Ryan and I are both talking because we're both somewhat new to GCP. We're like, we want to go find an IAM, like introduction to IAM on Google. What's that look like? How's it different? Or VPCs on Google, how are they different? That's what I kind of wanted to know. And they really just didn't have the breakout sessions to really give you that perspective, which I think was really a missed opportunity because it's a sales conference as much as it is a technical conference. It's supposed to be both. And it was very heavily weighted towards machine learning and Kubernetes and SRE. Like those are the three big things you could talk about all the time, and in security compliance as well, whereas mixed in there is too. But that was really the big four threads of talks you could get to, and that was kind of it.
It was more than just like, here's Kubernetes or a new feature of Kubernetes, or here is machine learning, or, you know, it was a very it was AI for this very targeted workload. It's very specific. And so like, even if I'm interested in AI or machine learning or language processing or any of these things, it's still a very niche. The breakout was a very niche thing about either how one company did this one specific task or how you can achieve this one specific type of thing. Since I didn't go because most of those titles turned me off, maybe if I got in there and I could sort of expand on how to use their platform. But what I really like about reInvent is when I go to those sessions and I'm like, oh, I could use this. I can incorporate this into my daily life and I can make this work for me. I can sort of, you know, daydream a little bit because of like, this is how I'm getting someone's reference architecture, or I'm getting an overview of the feature set of the service, where I didn't really seem to get that from the breakouts at GCP.
Someone's rearranging furniture.
Sorry, man. I'm in an Airbnb. I'm in a wicker chair, and just every time I move at all, it crinkles and cracks, and all of a sudden my back gets sore, and I'm like, I gotta move.
Nice. The big question that I left GCP with that I have not been able to answer yet is, if Google's big strategy seems to be Google Kubernetes service, AI, big data, and machine learning, and security, and that's the three big investment areas. That's what they're trying to deliver to you. And if I'm an enterprise customer, is that enough to make me want to move my workloads to GCP? And knowing enterprises that I've worked at and people I know and where they work, going to Kubernetes is a transformation that takes multiple years. Moving to machine learning and AI is all typically greenfield applications. Those aren't the things as an enterprise I really need right now. They're great like future states that I want to get to, but if I just need to move my data center to Google, they don't have a lot there to offer me. And I think that's probably the biggest risk they have from an enterprise perspective is, how do they meet these enterprise customers with what they need today versus what they could give them in the future, which is really compelling. But if you don't meet me today, I don't want to get to your future state because I can't get there.
I think that it's clear that what they're doing, although they're trying to increase their service portfolio across the board to make it possible for an enterprise with complex, multiple different types of workloads to go all in on Google. Like, that's their long-term goal, and they're working on it. But at GCP Next, the strategy is lead with your best punch. Lead with the areas you're strongest in.
And I get that. And I definitely think those are fantastic strengths. And I think you should be leading with those. But you still got to have my, Windows 2003 server that I need to be able to move to GCP. I still need to be able to do that. If you can't help me there, I can't move my workload.
And I think you can. Like, they have a compute workload that you can run, and they are leveraging, their AD connector service that they announced. They are making inroads there. So it's just interesting. It's more of the developer productivity things that I find missing. It seems a workload more suited to something if I'm going to build it all myself. Like, I'm gonna deploy my own Elasticsearch and manage that. I'm gonna, have my own cache layer. I'm going to have all that. I'm not going to use these services that can be managed for me.
Pre-Next, there was a few announcements kind of leading into the conference. These are the things that typically were slated to be finished by Next, but weren't necessarily keynote worthy. And so the first one was they introduced 5 new compute instances and 2 new memory optimized instances. So this now allows you to get either from 4 to 60 vCPUs and 16 gigabytes, 240 gigs of memory, and the 5 new compute instances. And if your app is memory constrained, they have 2 new instances for you that either have 208 vCPUs or 416, and they offer you between 5.7 terabytes of RAM and 11.5 terabytes for RAM.
Wow.
That is a big server. Interesting enough, they did not announce pricing on the memory instances because telling you that it's going to cost you, all of your children and your mortgage is probably not going to be acceptable to most people.
It sort of hurts sales.
And the next announcement was the new healthcare API. So a few months ago, Azure actually announced something very similar to this. This is a FIR-compliant API that allows you to move healthcare data in and out of the Google services, and particularly BigQuery and data flows and the cloud machine learning language. It does provide you with support for HL7v2 for applications, which are typically SaaS apps and clinical systems, as well as DICOM medical imaging metadata storage. They tie this into their cloud DLP solutions, which are actually really cool. So they can do all the de-identification of PHI data and automatically detect it and remove it from your system. And this was announced Sunday before next, and then they announced about 4 hours later, McKesson's going with Google as a strategic customer. So, very clearly set up to lead into the week of Google Next.
Yeah, this is the definition: how to win new workloads. Get really specific to an industry, completely remove the friction of getting the data there. We should be seeing more options like this across more verticals.
Now, both Azure and Google have announced this for support. I don't know if Amazon has. It's something, if they haven't, clearly this is something that people are asking for, and I wouldn't be surprised to see AWS follow this lead.
Let me adjust my tinfoil hat, but I am starting to get more nervous as we start putting all this data into these large providers, and they're going to aggregate together. So this isn't more than just one health company managing this data and managing it on the cloud. This is going to be multiple healthcare companies all using a service, and all that data is going to be available at some point to these larger companies. And so what they do with that data will become very important. Like, how anonymized can they actually keep it? And then what kind of value can they extract out of it? Especially if you look at the pricing for this. Like, it's very low. They've made this very introductory. If you're a smaller healthcare provider that doesn't have a lot of transactions, the service is practically free.
I just cannot wait for the day when I can walk into a new doctor's office and show them my ID and they have access to my medical history. I'm like tired of writing down the same stuff over and over and over again. And it's any way we can converge all that stuff or aggregate all that stuff into a single place and give me the choice to share my data with whichever provider I happen to be using on a particular day, while still allowing somebody to have an overall view, because I think the more data you have about somebody's health, the better service you're going to give them in the end. Bring it on. This is great.
You'll have that service, and the next day your insurance premiums will go up just because you walk through that door.
Possibly. I mean, I think we have that now to some degree.
Very good.
Healthcare is tied very much to how much you use it and your company's usage of healthcare. So, yeah, it isn't instantaneous, but it does happen at the renewal period. The last pre-announcement that I thought was worthy of the show was Google Cloud Memory Store now supports Redis 4.0 and some new manual failover APIs, so you can manually invoke failover between regions or availability zones inside the Google Cloud. Redis 4 adds new caching improvements with the new least frequently used algorithms and, of course, active memory defragmentation.
The funniest thing in this announcement was the active memory defragmentation. Redis can now defragment memory while online. This helps with actively reclaiming unused memory, which prevents unnecessary crashes. It doesn't prevent all the necessary crashes, but just the unnecessary ones. You can tell that the product announcement was written by not a marketing person, but probably a tech person.
Very, very true. All right, let's move on to announcements from Next itself. So Sundar started off the keynote with the announcement of Google Anthos is now GA'd. As I mentioned earlier in our debate on the draft, this is a rebranding of what they announced last year, which was the Google's Cloud Service Provider service. It's a collection of GKE on-premises, Istio for networking, a new Anthos config management tool for automatic policy and security at scale across GKE clusters. It's tightly integrated into Apogee and native for serverless, and also all of the building tools, the Velostrat migration utilities, as well as Stackdriver for all your monitoring. The big thing that they talked about, without trying to say the vendor or cloud's name, they were very big to highlight that you can run GKE now on any cloud provider, be that AWS, Azure, or on-premises. So now this is the dream of multi-cloud with GKE given to you by Google.
Yeah, so who wants portability? Not the guy in first place.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, but the pricing.
I did find it funny how much of a struggle it was not to say any of the other cloud providers' name, and then they very quickly highlighted in a demo that they're pointing at an AWS instance in the host name. Like, it's kind of strange.
Showing a host name in a DNS URL is one thing, versus Larry Ellison mentioning Amazon, 100 plus times in the keynote at Oracle World. So I applaud their restraint from trying to name other clouds in this particular keynote. But they did mention on day 2, Google had the least number of downtime minutes of any cloud provider, which was a bit, of a lie, because while Amazon had more downtime by a couple hundred minutes, none of them had a full global outage like Google did.
There's some clever math at play to come up with those numbers.
Sure.
And I would love to see the source data and how they actually aggregated those numbers across, because it is sort of like, it seems maybe a little biased.
It was definitely biased.
If you don't run any services, can you claim 100% uptime better than any other provider? I don't know.
my uptime is fantastic.
You don't run any services, that's for sure. So, Jonathan, you mentioned the pricing. Do you want to talk about the pricing of this service?
The pricing, yeah. From the day Kurian was announced CEO of GCP, I was kind of wondering, like, is he being planted there by Oracle? Is it is there some kind of conspiracy going on here? What's going to happen? Where's the Oracle influence going to be on GCP? And we found it in the Anthos pricing, because the enterprise pricing for this is outrageous. $10K a month. And it's priced in bundles of 100 vCPUs. There's no free tier for $10K a month.
It's also a 12-month commitment. So it's not just like I could turn this on today, try it out for a month, and I just paid 12th of that price. You're paying $10,000 a month. It's $120,000 a year, no matter what you do. And if you go to 101 or 102 vCPUs, now you have to buy a whole nother bundle. So now you're at $240,000 because you went over that threshold a little bit. Now they say that they won't turn anything off when you go over that 100 vCPUs, but that they will notify your salesperson, who will reach out to you to adjust your licensing as appropriate.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, it seems an anti-pattern to a lot of cloud practices and cloud building. Like, a lot of the advantage to moving to one of these hyperscalers is that I only pay for what I'm using at the time. And so to have this level of commitment, like, I get committing to get a price break. That's a different story. This is a commitment to a service. I have to commit for the entire year, and I have to extract that value. And it's from a business perspective, it's confining, and I don't want that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a barrier of entry to even try the thing. $12K to turn it on for 5 minutes to see how it goes.
Yeah, pass.
Yeah, I'm assuming that if you have a salesperson, if you're lucky enough to have a salesperson at least.
If you don't have a salesperson today, they announced that their go-to-market strategy is being beefed up in big ways, with lots of salespeople, lots of SAs being hired as fast as they can. So if you don't have a person now, you will very soon, because they want to have that enterprise relationship with you. So the next announcement was Cloud Run, which was actually not a keynote announcement. It was announced, Shadow announced during the keynote. But this is a fully managed serverless execution environment with containers. So it's basically Lambda, but with Fargate as the engine behind the door, if you're familiar with the AWS tools. And this can be run on top of your existing GKE clusters, or it can natively launch its own Kubernetes nodes to handle your load. It does leverage native APIs, the Knative APIs, to be clear, to bring the serverless developer experience to you and the portability that you expect from both your Kubernetes clusters as well as now to your Lambda containers. This also included an open sourcing of the functions framework and new updates for all of the current runtimes, including Node.js 8, Python 3.7, Go 1.11, Node.js 10, Java 8, Ruby 2.5, and Java 11 are now all in alpha or beta stage. So you can now use those, which is what Jonathan was arguing about earlier.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I guess this is kind of this is the Kubernetes equivalent of what Amazon were doing with Firecracker.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much so. It's a little bit more fully baked than Firecracker is, at least in this first version of what Firecracker is. And so, interesting, Kelsey Hightower, someone was tweeting about it, and he reached out and said, don't really think about this as an event-based system. This is not events, this is containers. And so keep that in mind as you kind of move forward with this project as well. They see functions slightly differently than Amazon sees functions.
Yeah, I saw this much more as like a batch like a batch task in Fargate than I actually saw this as true, like, serverless Lambda type of thing, which is great when you need that functionality, because as anyone who's developed Lambda functions, and once it gets to a certain level of complexity, it can be challenging to create that function and maintain that function. And so containers are, because they're so portable, are much easier to maintain. You can do a lot more. There's a lot more flexibility inherent in them, so it is kind of a neat offering where you can do both.
On the scale of serverless to servers, that there should be kind of another axis of that whole thing, kind of like the Magic Quadrant. Sure, I don't have to manage the servers exactly, but I still do have to now rebuild my containers every time there's OS patches. Whereas with the Amazon-style Lambda functions, I just provide the code and they manage the container. So
Google has quite a few tools to keep your containers compliant. With automated building processes, as well as and when we get to the security section later, we'll talk about some of their new security tools around containers. Things like runtime filtering and binary executable allowances, to runtime filtering of vulnerabilities. They have a bunch of stuff in containers they're doing, and automation that they built to help you simplify that build process.
I remember a couple of episodes ago we talked about the Google were actually providing managed base images as well, which kind of helps the whole thing.
You are still managing a config of effectively an OS though, whereas you're not with Lambda, which is I agree. definitely less abstraction, more work, more customizability.
So Google's next announcement was their battle. They're joining the battle over open source monetization. So this is the new fully managed open source partnership. So they announced a strategic partnership with Confluent, DataStax, Elastic's InfluxDB, MongoDB, Neo4j, and Redis Labs to now provide a fully managed service for these partners to couple GCP into a single user experience across management, billing, and support. And so this is basically their belief that Google's always had a strong commitment to open source and the open cloud, and that they believe open source is the future of public cloud. It's foundational, and why they announced projects like Kubernetes, TensorFlow, and Go in the past, and supporting open source is part of their core tenets. So this is they're going exactly the opposite way as our friends at Amazon are, and basically making this partnership where this is all fully integrated and tightly coupled. So nice move by Google. I think it's interesting.
Peter hit the nail on the head last week with this, where it's these are all things which are heavily compute based, and Google are going to get their money one way or another with people running these services on their platform, so they don't care.
It's not necessarily whether or not you support open source. I think Amazon will also say that they're heavily supporting open source, but it's more around how you plan to go to market with companies that have that are built around an open source or open core model. So do you believe in partnering with a company to manage the that service and maybe do a rev share on top of your platform, or do you want to offer a pure open source version and completely control that offering yourself?
One of the ways that you catch up when you're the third entry into the market on cloud, right, and you're several years behind, is you do this partnerships and you say, look, we're going to partner with NetApp, we're going to partner with Elastifile, we mentioned last week, you're going to partner with Confluent, and that's all great until they're basically a monopoly and there's no pricing available. There's no way for you to manage pricing, and when your customers are saying to you, we love this service, but it's too expensive, so we're not going to use it, which is what's going to eventually happen with some of these services. Google doesn't have another choice because they're not investing in these technologies like Amazon is. So now Amazon, is making them angry in different ways, but Amazon's saying, hey, our customers want these features. They don't want to pay for them in the way that you want them. So we're just taking the open source component and we're making it into a service that we can now, the customers can use because that's what they're asking for. And we're trying to meet our customers' needs, where Google's saying, we don't really care about that. We just want to have this product functionality. If it's a win-win for both of us, the partner, then great. And it's now fully embedded into our portal, and now everything's there for you to take out of the box and just pay for however Confluent or DataStax or Elastic wants to charge you for it.
Yeah, but they're still going to have to compete with the Amazon offering. Confluent, DataStax, Mongo, those guys are going to have to compete with the aggregate pricing. So they're still going to be pressured to lower their prices to be competitive with the Amazon offering. So I think Google's in pretty good shape here. I mean, unless
I definitely think Google's in good shape. I don't know how great this actually is for some of these cloud providers or these open source providers.
Right. No, they should be pressured to lower prices to their value add level.
The other question that came to my mind is, what's the security look like on this, right? So I have a fully managed service that Google's now offering to me from Elasticsearch. Is that a special version of Elasticsearch that Google signed off on because now they're sort of responsible for some of the shared security model? Is that data still living in my account? Is it transitioning to a different account that Elasticsearch has? Where does the data reside? There's a bunch of questions they didn't really answer in this offering. And, in the Amazon marketplace or even in the Azure marketplace, when you pick up these products, they're AMIs and instances that you run in your account typically when you take a marketplace offering. So you know where the data is, you know how it works, and they just didn't explain any of that on stage, which I felt was a missed opportunity.
They did talk about the support model being a single point of contact for support. So if you think about,
they did, yes.
If you think about that, it has to be a gated version because you're training an entire support staff for Google in order to support these Elastic clusters or these MongoDB clusters. And so to keep all those SOPs in order and all these things, like there is going to be a certain level of gate. And I wonder how fast they'll be able to keep up with that. It could be quite a challenge.
Yeah, I think it's going to turn into buying Red Hat on AWS. Those companies are going to develop their features that are quote unquote value add. They're going to get a small rev share cut based on that. And otherwise, it's going to be a Google support managed service.
Enterprise databases managed for you with enhancements and a new engine. So first of all, they announced PostgreSQL 11 support and a new big table multi-region replication feature. And then the big announcement was Microsoft SQL Server is now going to be a first-class citizen of Cloud SQL, fully managed SQL Server, backups, tuning, all the things that you would expect from a managed database with SQL Server. You can BYOL your licensing from Microsoft, or you can buy the licensing through Google directly.
This is a smart play for them for adopting, enterprise. I think there's a lot of Microsoft SQL out there, and I think it fits very nicely with their story with other Microsoft products as to be attractive for an enterprise audience. I mean, it's an obvious move, but it's a good move.
Yeah, and it feeds into their Windows story, right? If you want to go after enterprises that are predominantly Windows, there's definitely a lot of SQL Server out there.
Data is their business. That's what they're going after, big data and machine learning like crazy. So anything they can do to bring more people's data into their cloud is good for them.
I am definitely not surprised.
Well, it was in your honorable mention, so. Yeah, that one came up. I was like, if you'd only put that in the draft, you would have been set.
I'm surprised it took so long, actually. I mean, it's been a few years since Microsoft announced SQL Server on Linux, so I'm kind of surprised it took them this long.
You only have so many resources on working on Google Cloud at any given time. You're doing this major GKE features, you're doing a lot of stuff. Where do you spend your time and resources, right? And if before Thomas came, Diane wasn't as interested in tackling that market, maybe that's the problem. So, while we know very well how Amazon does product feature road mapping and narratives and their go-to-market process, because they've been pretty open about it, I really don't know how Google's process works. I don't know if customers' needs are really considered or not. It's an interesting question. I have no idea how that works. BigQuery Business Intelligence Engine is the next announcement. This is a new in-memory analysis service for BigQuery to allow users to analyze large and complex datasets with sub-second query response time. This enables real-time dashboarding over streaming or static data. It has automatic performance tuning and capacity flexibility, and a really nice BI report builder that allows you to build these reports and design them with the graphs and the different data sets that you want to show.
The BigQuery was so quick. We were using it to analyze our AWS bills. So this is
that's funny.
Just with Google Sheets on top, and it was super cool. And I can't wait for us to be able to use that for more use cases. I want to try this.
Yeah, in context, you can collaborate on up to 10 billion rows of data with BigQuery. 10 billion rows. That's an awful lot of data in a spreadsheet.
It is an awful lot of data.
Yeah, the conference was my introduction to BigQuery, and now I'm just daydreaming about use cases. I'm like, how can I use this? Because it was pretty slick. The demos they showed, the amount of data it's analyzing and how fast it is, and then just their integrations. Like it is sort of crazy. Putting this directly in Google Sheets, for instance, and just running a query and then outputting that output into your cell it's kind of nuts. It really speaks to the power of these big data efforts, because once it starts getting real, people are interjecting it into their daily lives, you'll start seeing more of the benefit of it.
Yeah, that Sheets feature was a really great demo in day 2. Them basically tying Google Sheets to a BigQuery table, running this data, visualizing it out into Excel, which is a language a lot of people understand, or Google Sheets version of Excel, excuse me. It really clarified in my mind how G Suite is such an enabler to Google Cloud for Google, and why it's such a big deal that these two products are together. Because there was some question of why is G Suite part of Google Cloud? And I think this is the clear answer, is that once you link these two places together, now you're meeting the users who use this data with the full power of their machine learning AI technology. That really opens the doors, and I can see why Microsoft is sort of freaked out about that too, because it's a big threat to Office.
For sure.
And then you look at Amazon's WorkDocs technology, and you can very clearly say that it's just not the same level of service or capabilities as either of those two products. And you see why they're trying to do it, though, because they do see it as a potential threat.
Yeah, I don't think Amazon would ever integrate WorkDocs with something like Athena.
I think they would now.
Maybe they would now.
Hey, that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
This actually announcement really excited me. So they announced Google Voice for G Suite. So now you can assign phone numbers to your G Suite users. So they can now have a virtual phone number that they attach to their desk phone or to a mobile device. Or you can even buy telephones and integrate them into either your on-premise PBX or directly into Google over the internet. So this is a now full-featured phone capability that ties into Hangouts Meets and calendars. It does have some auto attendant features, support desk phones in the higher packages, and the top package includes advanced reporting with BigQuery as well. This is going to run you between $10 and $30 a month, depending on what features you are looking for and what capabilities you want and how many numbers you want to call, unlimited, international, etc. But overall, I was most excited about this because I love Google Voice, and I always assumed Google Voice was on the chopping block to be killed like Google Reader any day. And the fact that it's now part of G Suite makes me think that it'll live a little while longer.
Yeah, they made a few acquisitions over the years. I think even the original Google Voice technology was an acquisition. And it's taken them a long time to turn this into a product, but this is great now. This is great.
Super excited about this one because it just means that the consumer version will get some love, hopefully. All right, new storage features. Multiple storage features got wrapped up into a single announcement. So they announced a new ice cold archive storage, which will be coming soon. A new cloud file store has gone GA with higher throughput. Regional persistent disks will be going GA sometime next week. And then they have a new bucket policy and v4 signature support for cloud storage, which is now in beta, and new IAM roles for cloud storage transfer services. So overall, quite a few enhancements to your Google storage portfolio here.
Did they announce pricing on the ice cold?
I did not see pricing yet on the ice cold because it's still coming soon. Once it hits alpha, beta, I assume you'll see that pricing.
That's the main feature of that type of storage, is the price.
It is. I think it was hey, Amazon just announced this. We really should do something like that too.
Start the product feature set with the price and then send the price to the engineers and tell them to come up with something.
Yes, for sure. All right. The next one here is Google Cloud is now the best place to run your Microsoft Windows apps. So now across the board, they will allow you to bring your own licenses for SQL Server or for Windows or any other Microsoft technology that they'll allow you to do license portability with. They announced a new managed Active Directory service, which is pretty fantastic. And then they now have a new seamless migration services, Volo Strata, which is a migration tool that now supports Windows. So you get a full set of Windows capabilities, very much targeted at enterprises who have large Windows workloads. This is a really nice enhancement to the overall G Cloud suite.
Yeah, it's something they absolutely needed. It's about time that it's coming. There's just no way to have a cloud partner who can't support a bulk of your workloads.
Going back to the cold storage, they did actually add a price to the blog post after I looked at it. So it is 0.0012 per gigabyte or $1.23 per terabyte per month.
And what was the Amazon one? Was $1 per terabyte per month, roughly?
I believe roughly, yes.
All right.
So pretty close.
23% higher.
Well, it's not just a storage cost. It's also the cost to get it out again when you're done.
Yeah, but you're never going to use it. Come on.
That's why you're putting it there.
Because you're contractually obligated to. That's why.
Yes, exactly. New Cloud Code IDE integrations have been announced. These are plugins for IntelliJ and VS Code that brings automation and assistance to every phase of the development cycle. So it has the ability to attach directly to debuggers and GKE. You can tie directly into the Cloud Code tooling and Cloud Build software and Stackdriver. So you're right there making a change to a configuration file or to a bit of line of code, and you hit commit, and it'll build it right there, deploy it, and off to the races you go. So super tightly integrated IDE plugins to help drive things forward.
I'm really disappointed I didn't make this one of the draft predictions, because with all the work Microsoft's been doing on DevTools, it made sense that the VS Code extensions were going to be featured.
I actually thought this was a web IDE, but then I found out later as I was reading the blog post that it was just plugins for existing IDEs. But considering the Google Chromebooks, you would think that they would be all over a web-based IDE as well.
Yeah, because they have the cloud-based console that they use to interact with the Google Cloud, so it would make sense to at least have some sort of direction there. You'd need it.
Well, and I think what they've done is they kind of pull in those IDE components where they need them in different UI patterns, and so they don't really need a unified IDE framework. Is kind of thing how they see it. But I do wish they would come out with something like a Cloud9 type solution.
Until then, again, decrease the friction. Get into other people's existing workflows.
There are going to be new GCP regions in 2020. One in Seoul, Korea, and the other one in Salt Lake City. Apparently Olympics locations are popular data center locations. So, both of these will have 3 availability zones when they launch sometime in 2020, and always good to have more availability zones. This actually puts them now at 3 West Coast availability zones. and they have several on the East Coast as well. So they have a lot of coverage in the U.S. If you're using GCP.
And Seoul and Salt Lake City now have something to do with their curling stadiums.
Very
I
nice.
guess population-wise, it makes sense to have a lot of data centers on the West Coast.
Well, it's good because you have definitely population centers over here, as well as if you have a small user population in Asia that is not worthy of building out a whole infrastructure there, having them on the West Coast is a little bit better than having them on the East Coast. Apigee Hybrid API Management has been announced. This allows you to run your Apigee API Gateway runtime anywhere, either in your data center or any of the public clouds of your choice. So this is a full-featured API management solution across all your environments. The customer-managed runtime plane for all API traffic. It includes API design, security, publishing, analytics, and the developer portal. And it is a containerized deployment of the runtime, so it's super easy to run in any type of container runtime solution.
Well, you run Apigee on premise before Google bought Apigee.
You could, which makes sense that they would now have this capability, but it is fully now managed into their backplane, right? So basically in Google Cloud, you control it, you manage it, you run it, you configure it all there, but then it runs wherever you need it to be.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. And then they introduced the new traffic directory service and several other network enhancements on top of that as well. This includes a new service mesh solution built on Envoy. So Envoy is apparently the winner in the service mesh space, as Amazon and Google have now both adopted Envoy as their go-to solution for this, as well as it's currently in beta. You can deliver traffic workloads to where and when you want it, both attached to VMs and containerized workloads, and it's heavily integrated into Anthos as well. So pretty nice little enhancement there if you're doing a lot of things in the network space. They also added a new high availability VPN solution that is 99.99% available, and this can either be set up as active-active or active-passive, depending on what device you're attaching to and what it can support. And they now also can support up to 100 gigabits per second circuits for their dedicated interconnects, which is very similar to like a private link. And they also now allow private access over those interconnects to Google services like G Suite and BigQuery and all those things. So now that can all traverse your private backbone.
I think Envoy was actually in my prediction originally.
It might have been. I don't remember. Just trying to get those points back, aren't you, Peter?
No, I already got the points.
Yeah, you've already won.
I just like to gloat.
Yeah.
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 You know how many times I've actually won the lightning round?
Once.
Yeah, and I don't even think I won it that time, so I'm taking this one.
Well, we did have Chris Short say that he didn't think it was fair that you were being judged in the competition at all.
Exactly.
So they also did. Sorry, I missed this one, but they announced new network service tiers, Premier and Standard. So Premier traffic allows you to allow all your traffic, regardless of region, to traverse the Google backbone. Or you can use the standard tier, which accesses the traffic at the region level, just like you are typically used to. So this is really nice if you want to take advantage of all that sweet bandwidth that Google owns to deliver your traffic to your users that much faster.
That's going to be fun to see. I'm sure the next thing we're going to see is a bunch of smart people doing blog posts and doing some tests around it to see the difference in latency and throughput.
Yeah, I would be curious to see that.
Does having Envoy as being the service mesh of choice between different hyperscalers, is that an advantage for people doing multi-cloud? Do you think there'll be an opportunity to service mesh between providers?
Well, I assume you service mesh between Istio clusters. Is that how you would do that?
So Istio is still under the hood Envoy is still under the hood on Istio. So it's their sidecar process is still Envoy based. So it just speaks to how these are all. Envoy is the clear open source winner in this, and everyone's sort of building on it and moving in that direction. This is just kind of more managed for you, so that you don't have to do all the heavy lifting of setting up this service and having it all set in place. And it'll give you, I suspect, prescribed endpoints where you can tie in and provide the connectivity as well as the visibility of your services.
And then on the security front, several new features here. They now are providing access transparency logs and access approval logging in near real time. So they were saying that they would basically get you logging of your APIs within 4 to 5 seconds of when the action happens. So compared to Amazon's CloudTrail logs, which can be up to 4 hours delay, that's a really fantastic product and feature that they've released there. They have a new DLP user interface in beta, so allow you to dynamically configure DLP rules for your user population, either in chat or in your application natively, or different areas where you want to store data. This allows you to really focus on DLP without being a heavy-duty coder, and your engineers and your compliance team who do that type of classification data can now use that simple user interface, which is super nice.
So the trust through transparency, the access transparency for GCP is the one that I was talking about, where they're actually going to log when GCP admins interact with your data for support purposes. So this is when we were talking a little.
Oh, so that's part of this as well. So this is API logging when you use it, but as well as if Google uses it.
Oh wow!
Okay,
I missed that in the announcements. That's super cool. I actually really like that.
These are all requirements for HIPAA. So if they want their health API to be HIPAA compliant, then they need to have these controls in place.
Oh, and the fact that it's near real time. I mean, if you think about using this as a trigger, like that's always if you have to wait 4 hours for the trigger to be, trigger a remediation or some sort of auto healing capability, like that's a little long time to be considered like, self-healing. So the near real time is really interesting here, because then you could actually probably stop a security exploit or something as it's happening, rather than being reactive, even if it's an automated reaction.
Yeah, fast enough to be useful.
Yeah.
Yep. So then, still in the security space, they released Cloud Security Command Center as GA now. They also added to it, just to make it even better, new event threat detection, security health analytics, and cloud security scanning, and Stackdriver incident response and management capabilities, all coming either in beta or coming very soon to the command center. So they are making a large investment in what they're doing in the security space, in visibility and SOC reporting. They also have now added container registry vulnerability scanning, binary authorization, sandboxing, and managed SSL certificates for GKE and some Shield VM capabilities. So containers are a big part of their strategy, of course, tied very closely to GKE. And then several new G Suite enhancements around phishing and malware protections, and admin collaboration automation portals to allow it simpler administration of your G Suite stuff. So overall, a lot of security features coming out the door of Google this week, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, that container registry vulnerability scanning is something that everybody wants. That's just an awesome.
Well, yeah, there's several players in that space,
Yep.
right? You have Twistlock and you have Aqua Security and a couple others. So if this becomes a native function of your cloud provider, that puts some of those companies at risk. All right, moving along. We won't spend a lot of time on this one because it's all around data. But Smart Data Analytics, there's some new tooling for moving your SaaS app connectors to BigQuery, data warehouses to BigQuery, everything to data to BigQuery. How do you get it there faster? Use the new tooling. They have the new connected Sheets, like we talked about earlier, which is the tight integration with Sheets and the overall BigQuery engine. And so you can power all that complicated Excel logic that you were doing in VB now in Google Sheets or in Google BigQuery. And then they have turning data into predictions with new auto ML tables and BigQuery machine learning capabilities to allow you to very rapidly detect and address predictions in your data models.
That Fusion Control Center looks really neat. It reminds me of the Azure thing we reviewed a couple of weeks ago, where you can drag and drop basically like factories, data factories, and say what comes in, what goes out, and how the data gets transformed. So it looks kind of a similar. Obviously, all the providers are working on similar functionality, but this looks really smooth.
Yeah, one of the other cool things in the space was they announced a new cloud catalog for data discovery and governance. And so this is a pre-built category of known data sets that are been compromised. So email addresses, passwords, things like that they have known about that you can now query. You can pipe into your DLP, you can pipe into your other query languages and use that data to not only identify data types, but also identify data that's potentially dangerous or compromised in other areas.
Yeah, it won't be long before personal information like date of birth and social security numbers, they won't be considered personal information anymore because they've been leaked so many times.
That's going to be great. I can't wait till then. I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
And then in the AI space, they released a competitor text tract called Document Understanding AI, which allows you to identify text objects inside documents or images and extract them as metadata components. A new contact center AI for your contact center use cases, and then several new products for Google Cloud Retail, including Vision Product Search, to do image-based searches of products, recommendations, AIs. If you have a large catalog and you want to make recommendations, you can now leverage all of that with Amazon or Google's out-of-the-box capabilities in the AI space. Which I don't necessarily know how I feel about them naming all these things AI, but overall they're good products, good features. We're not really artificial intelligence. So then our final announcement for Google GCP is new collaboration capabilities in G Suite. So they announced a ton of stuff in G Suite. So now it integrates with Google Assistant for your calendar. So you can now use Google Assistant on your mobile device to talk to your G Suite calendar. There's several new capabilities coming with G Suite add-ons now, where they'll have a marketplace to add third-party integrations into your G Suite capabilities. A new enterprise cloud search capability to make it easier to search your data across your G Suite portfolio. And then Hangouts Meets will now support live captioning, as well as a new public live streaming for events and increased meeting participants. So you're not capped at I think 20 was the previous cap, or maybe 50. The Connected Sheets feature we talked about a few times on the show, and then the Google Voice we talked about. And then the new Hangouts chat is now integrated with Gmail. And if you are using G Suite, you also now get the new Currents, which is the enterprise version of Google Plus, which hopefully does not leak data like Google Plus was leaking.
Cheap shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to go there. Sorry.
Seems like some of these things were already available to people who were using calendar integration with the assistant. That's been available to pretty much anybody, but I guess it wasn't a business-ready product.
A lot of the features that end up in G Suite start out on the consumer side first, and then they get moved over to the enterprise side over time as they mature. Which makes sense. Because why make all your enterprises unhappy when you can make your consumers unhappy?
Well, they're not paying for it, so yeah.
Yeah, they're you are the product if you're the consumer side.
Taking somebody you're offering for free and then starting to charge for it, it seems like counterintuitive, but I get it.
One of the big ones was the announcement. I think one of the collaboration announcements is around being able to edit in G Suite your Excel and Word docs.
Oh, in the same doc?
Yeah, so you can open it and you can edit it. You don't have to download it or convert it first.
Oh, yeah, if it's a Word version, right? Not a Google sheet, but it's actual Excel file or Word file, you can now edit it directly in. Yeah, that actually is really cool. When I was in the transition period from my last company going from Office to G Suite, you'd upload that Word doc and you go, I want to edit it, and then it'll make a second copy of it in the Sheets format or the Google Docs format, and then you have these like weird orphan documents all the time. So that is super nice, actually.
Yep.
And the formatting was never right. Tables are always messed up. It's all, it's a bit hit and miss.
Well, I mean, let's not get excited about that. That's probably still broken.
I think the live captioning is kind of interesting. I read recently that machine learning can lip read better than people can anymore.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, so I mean, that's an action-packed set of announcements. Most of these didn't make main stage. Most of these were, things they announced either in sessions or on their Twitter feeds or just in the blog posts. So a lot of incremental features in a lot of different areas, several big features in a couple of key areas. And overall, I don't necessarily think it was at the same pace of innovation that I've seen from Azure or from Amazon at their events. But, Thomas Kurian's only been there 10 weeks. And if this is where we're at 10 weeks in and he can really impact that roadmap and really start delivering stuff, I think Google next year might be real interesting.
Now we've reviewed all the announcements, all the big announcements. Do we feel differently about Google Next this year? I mean, we seemed a bit down on it at the beginning of the show. Are we a bit happier now we've reviewed things? My
opinion still stands. I still think there's really great stuff in machine learning and in GKE, and in the security space, I think that's all really strong. And I think the G Suite stuff is really great. And if I was using G Suite, I would be really happy with those things. But overall, like innovation in the cloud space, doing things that enterprises really need and want, I still think they have a ways to go.
For me, I'm down on the conference. I'm not down on the GCP platform. Like I still think that they are a really good contender to Amazon and Azure. Like if I was evaluating my cloud workloads today, I would have to evaluate what workloads I had, and a lot of use cases, I think they would come up the winner there. But for me, it's more along the lines of, did the conference actually provide me value? Was my 2 days really worth it? And it was 3 days long, and I opted not to go for that third day. What does that say? That's sort of how I feel about that.
I don't think anything's changed from my perspective, but I definitely think they have got strengths where if companies aren't afraid to have different workloads on different clouds, if you're evaluating on a workload by workload basis, there's some really strong points on GCP. It's just they're not there yet to where they can be all things to a complex enterprise. So a complex enterprise can't go all in, close down all their data centers, move everything to GCP.
If I was a startup and, or a very heavily containerized workload, they're a serious contender in that space. You just can't argue with what they're doing in Kubernetes and for the startups that would use this. I mean, I can see why Spotify made the pivot to these guys. It makes sense to me based on what the capabilities are and where Spotify is, right? They're a relatively young company. They were born very early in the container era. They adopted containers very quickly. They have a ton of big data machine learning capabilities that they use. It just makes sense. And I think this is what we're seeing is that, startups in particular are probably going to be the big adopter of Google Cloud in the next, year or so. And if these enterprise features start getting better and better, then, it becomes a contender to enterprise more and more every month that goes forward from here.
Especially for the enterprise transformed apps. So you look at what the enterprise is doing to transform their apps to make them more cloud native, and it looks a lot like what Google supports.
Yeah.
We've talked about multi-cloud and people being concerned about vendor lock-in, and that's why they've gone multi-cloud. I think what I've learned from product announcements in Next is that there's another reason to go multi-cloud, and that's clearly that the vendors are differentiating themselves in the services they're going to provide. Google is way ahead of the game in machine learning. I mean, look at the size of the instances, 400 vCPUs and terabytes of RAM. You just can't get that anywhere else. I think I see multi-cloud being a more important thing, but not for the reasons we used to think.
Thomas Kurian talked about his first 10 weeks at Google were a lot of customer meetings and listening to what customers wanted, and basically came back and said, customers want multi-cloud. And I'm like, people who want multi-cloud are typically in two camps. One, they pick the wrong cloud and they're moving to the right cloud as fast as possible. Or they have looked at best of breed solutions in the right cloud and they pick the right cloud for the solution they want. And that's where the real success stories are in multi-cloud. They think they do, but when you get into the complexities of what's there, I just don't see it. And if there's a listener of ours out there who is doing multi-cloud that's not just best of breed and they're actually doing web and database workloads across multiple clouds in a single application, I would love to talk to you because I just have never seen it. It's a unicorn that doesn't exist in my opinion. Everyone says it exists and I've never seen it, and I've been in this business for a long time.
I think everyone just wants the answer to, what do you do if Amazon hikes their prices? What do you do if they just discontinue a service? Everyone wants that answer. So that's why the multi-cloud conversation starts. But that's not the reality that we live in. Amazon wants to retain us as customers. They're not. That's how they make their money. They're not going to just all of a sudden say, no more DynamoDB, it's too expensive.
And that argument to me is purely driven out of someone who's an on-premise person who doesn't want to move to the cloud. They're spreading FUD around their company and they're selling their CIO, if we go to Amazon and they raise their prices, we're going to be screwed, or, we're going to lose a bunch of people who are data center people who aren't going to have a job anymore. And so that then turns into a CIO who, or a CTO who maybe doesn't fully understand this and, listen to that FUD. Now they're saying, well, I need a multi-cloud solution if I'm going to go to the cloud. So until I have a multi-cloud solution, that's my barrier to going to cloud. And that's a wrong answer.
And often these people are the people who've been with Equinix or CenturyLink or whoever as a data center provider and only had one data center provider. So it's sort of a bit of hypocrisy going on there. But the way I think about this is Google have been around for 20 years. And that they started managing huge amounts of data. Their business has been data all along. So it makes sense that big data and AI and machine learning is where they're heading as a company. Amazon didn't come from that. Amazon came from retail and consumer services. So it makes sense that they have a slightly different take on the services they're going to provide. And Microsoft Azure, the same thing. They've been establishment computing for 25 or 30 years. They come at the whole thing from a different place too. So I think multi-cloud will certainly take on a new meaning.
And from what I see is, you look at central IT departments of large corporations, and it's not a choice for them. Oftentimes, it's a requirement to support these clouds because their company actually looks more like a mutual fund than a single driven organization. There's so many business units and so many departments with so many competing interests. And the company can't block those people from leveraging the best tool for them to reach their goals, and they don't want to. And so they know they have to open the door here. Otherwise, you can have a bunch of people with credit cards everywhere or negotiating their own MSAs. And I think that's where multi-cloud really comes in, is that these larger organizations are going to have to support, give access to those platforms to all of their businesses.
Overall, I think it was a good conference. I think I have a different perspective on them than I did before, and I'm super excited to see where they get to in the next 12 months.
Yeah, me too.
Hear, hear.
We are not covering anyone else this week because it's Google Next was a full show. Next week, we will catch up on the news we missed from this week. We have the lightning round back, of course, next week, and we will catch up on everything that's happening in Azure and AWS, as anything else that's happened from Google since we recorded here tonight on Thursday. So thank you again all for coming. Thank you to Ryan, our judge and jury and executioner, for the draft decision there. I think it was a fair choice. And where can they find you if they're looking to follow your wit and insights?
I am available on most social media platforms on Ryron01. You have to say it that way. It's not how it's spelled. And yeah, I look forward to hearing back from you. And thank you so much for having on. And, I'm really glad that I could facilitate Peter with this win. I think he needed it.
The check's in the mail. Yeah. Don't say anything.
I think so. Yeah.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Foghorn Consulting and Audible.com. Subscribe today on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and tweet us your feedback at #thecloudpod.